Hello, fellow humans, and welcome to the first episode of my German course, Learning German with the Bible. I'm your host, and in this course, we are going to use what I consider to be the best textbook in the world, the Bible, to learn the German language. So, how am I going to do this? I'll use two versions of the Bible in German and two versions of the Bible in English. For German, I'm going to use the Luther 1545 version. That is the first Bible translation into the German language, done by Martin Luther in the year 1545. Now you might think, wow, that's almost 500 years old. Is it still good? It has a bit of an archaic language, sometimes, but overall it still holds up very well today. I think it has a much better style than the modern Schlachter 2000 version. That's the modern version used in many churches. It's a modern version, as I mentioned. It's a bit more accurate to the Hebrew original text, and I think it's a good comparison, good contrast to Luther's translation. And corresponding to that in English, I will use the King James Version and the New International Version to translate the verse that we are looking at, that you can have an overview. What does the verse mean? And, well, yes, what is the meaning of the verse that we are discussing? So, since this is the first episode, it's also fitting that we discuss the first verse of the Bible. That is Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In German, Genesis is called das erste Buch Mose. Erstes oder erster means first, Buch means book, and Moses, well, that's Moses. This isn't actually important. We are going to discuss this more in depth later. For now, I just want you to know that this erstes Buch Mose means the first book of Moses. That means Genesis. So, we're going to look at Genesis 1, verse 1. I'm going to read all four versions of this verse to you, and you can already take a look at it and see where are the differences. So, am Anfang schuf Gott Himmel und Erde. Im Anfang schuf Gott die Himmel und die Erde. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that's our first verse. Let's take a look at the first word in both versions, the am and the im. As you can see, in English, both correspond to the two words in the. But in German, you notice that there's a difference between them. So, what do they mean and how are they different? In German, am is a short form for an dem, and this corresponds to the English at the, while im corresponds to the English in the. It is a short form of the German in dem. Usually, if you want to say an dem or in dem in German, you use the short form am or im respectively instead. That is not exactly necessary, but it's just better German, so you should use it. When to use them exactly, we will discuss later. For now, I just want to give you an overview. Now for the second word, Anfang, which is the German word for beginning, Anfang. So I took a bit of a look at this word and tried to trace its history, because from what I've seen, most German words can be traced back to some Latin or English word. And that of course helps us to understand and memorize them better. For example, the word Anfang is derived from the Proto-Germanic word Fanger. Fanger. This means to catch, take, or capture. And it's also related to the English word fang, which refers to the sharp teeth of an animal, like a cat, or a dog, or a wolf. So, in this way, the words fang in English and Anfang, beginning, in German are related. I just find that really interesting. Next, I have the word schuf. This, as you can see, corresponds to the English word created. Now, schuf is the simple past form of a German word schaffen. Schaffen. Schaffen means to make, to create, or to achieve something. In English, you can also use them like this, for example, to say, I made this, or we made it, to say that you created something, or that you achieved something. It's derived from a Proto-Germanic word, skapjana, which also means make, create, or shape. And it is related to the English word for shape, which means the outline or the form of an object. So perhaps you could also say, in the beginning God shaped the world. Really interesting. Next we have God. God, 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 God. You can hardly tell the difference. They are really, really similar, and of course they also derive from the same word. In Proto-Germanic, people used to say Guda, Guda, which means an invoked spirit or a deity. And here I have listed various translations of the word God into other languages. For example, in Dutch people say God, because in Dutch people use this kind of throaty G, God. In German we say Gott, as you already learned. In Yiddish, which is very similar to German, people say Gott. In Danish people say Gul. It writes good, but in Danish most of the time the D at the end of a word is pronounced like an L, so it's Gul. In Norwegian and Swedish it's really good, and in Icelandic and Gothic it's Guv, Guv. You see this weird letter in Icelandic which looks like a mix between a cross and a D. This letter corresponds to the English TH, the. So now we have the word die. Die in German, which only appears in the Schlachter version of the text. As you can see in Luther's text, Luther doesn't use the die particle. The die particle corresponds to the English word the. Now Luther left out this particle for stylistic reasons. So he wants to say, am Anfang schuf Gott Himmel und Erde, because Luther was very much focused on style. He very much wanted to create a book that was easy to remember and easily to read out to each other, perhaps even easy to sing. So that's why he tried to leave out such particles which he deemed to be not necessary. Technically, you could also say in English, in the beginning God created heaven and earth. That would also be fine English, but for accuracy of the translation it is left in here. So, as you already know, if you know anything about German, you will know that in German there are like 6 different words that all correspond to the English the. Now again, when exactly these articles need to be used, we will discuss in more detail later. For now, all you need to know is that whenever you see a der, a die, a das, a den, a dem, or a des, they all correspond to the English the. Now let's take a look at the next word, Himmel, or die Himmel in Schlachter's version. In English, this corresponds to the heaven or the heavens. So we notice there's a difference between singular and plural. How does that come about? Now in German, the plural or singularity of an object is usually determined both by inflection and by the article in front of it. In this case, it is rather simple, because here we only have the article to give us a clue about singular or plural, because Himmel is not an inflected word. So Himmel is by default gendered to be male. In German, all words have a gender that is either male, female, or neutral. For some reason, Himmel is male. I didn't make the rule, I just have to apply it. So, der Himmel. That means the heaven in its normal masculine singular form. If, however, you have a masculine word which you want to express in the plural, you use the particle die. Die Himmel, that means the heavens. Finally, as you will remember, Luther does not use any article. So, in his translation, it is ambiguous whether he means heaven or heavens, singular or plural. This is ambiguous. Let's take a close look at the word Himmel. I noticed the difference because in English you have actually 2 ways to say this word. Well, in German, there's only one. In English, there's the heaven as a kind of spiritual place where people go to after they die. And there's also the sky, which is a physical place, the place where clouds are and planes and all sorts of things. In German, you only have Himmel to express both heaven as a spiritual place and the sky as a physical place. The words Himmel and heaven both derive from the Proto-Germanic word himinas, and they are in turn derived from the Proto-Indo-European word hekmo. And I looked this up and I found that its word hekmo also has many cognates in other languages. Originally, in Proto-Indo-European, hekmo meant something like stone or ceiling. In Sanskrit, there exists the word asman, which means stone or firmament. While in Persian, there exists the word asiman, which means sky or heaven. In Lithuanian, they have the word akmo, which means stone. And both English and German also have the word hammer, or Hammer in German, which refers to a kind of tool that is used to beat nails. All these, and the words heaven and Himmel, derive from the word hekmo, from Proto-Indo-European. Next we have something really simple, the und, which almost sounds like and means exactly the same thing. Und is just the German version of and it's used in the exact same way. Next we have Erde, or die Erde, the earth and the earth in the English versions. So, Erde might also look familiar to you, because it is kind of similar to the English word. If we look at it, both derive from the Proto-Germanic word ervo, which means earth, but it also means ground, soil, of a world in general. Of course, it also refers to the planet Earth. The Proto-Germanic word ervo, in turn, is derived from the Proto-Indo-European word her. And again, we have a number of cognates in other Indo-European languages, which to compare I just found so interesting. So, in Albanian you have the word var, which means grave. In Lithuanian you have the word erdve, which refers to a physical space or expanse. In Welsh there's the word erv, which means acre or field. And in Greek there's eratze, which means on the ground. So, these are all the words in the text in Genesis 1 in German. Now you should be able to translate this text, this verse, into English. If you like, you can try it, but there's no obligation to do it. I think copying the Bible is just a really good exercise to practice languages. Now, I wondered myself, how does this text, the German text, compare to the original Hebrew? Is it an accurate, is it a faithful translation? So, I took a look at the Hebrew original. This is from the Westminster Leningrad Codex, and it reads something like this. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. And I tried to give a literal translation of this into English, which reads like this. At beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Hebrew has a definite particle that corresponds to the English the, but it is not used in the Bereshit at the beginning, which means beginning or at beginning. It just means at beginning, but not at the beginning. However, I can understand that most English translations translate it as at the beginning, because at beginning is simply terrible English. So, now I put the 5 texts next to each other so that we can compare them. And I want you to take a look at it with me together, so that you can see how exactly they correspond and compare to each other. I put on this colorful overlay to show where I think that the text disagrees with the Hebrew original and where it could perhaps be better. So, first of all, I marked all the opening particles, the the im, the inve, and the inve, with red, or in Luther's case, orange, to indicate that it is half right, half wrong. I marked im and inve as wrong because they both contain the definite particle, the. However, in English I marked it as orange because, again, if it was left out, then it would just be terrible English. It wouldn't be grammatically correct. So I can understand why it was left in, but still, it's not exactly the Hebrew original. So the only one who actually got it right in this case was Luther, who translated it as like which means at the beginning. So this makes Luther somewhat unique because he's the only one who got that right. However, what Luther got wrong, or at least partially wrong, or at least half wrong, or he didn't make it clear enough, was Himmel. Like the KJV gives it as singular, so the heaven. But in the Hebrew, it has the particle shamayim, or im. Im in Hebrew means the plural. So that means that it's the plural, and the KJV translates it as a singular, so that's just wrong, unfortunately. In Luther's case, I marked the Himmel as orange because it is not clear whether it is actually in the plural or in the singular. So when we compare the versions, we see that all kind of have their flaws, but overall, I think all of them get the picture correctly. So I would say all of them are good translations, well done and easy to read. Now I'd like to thank you very much for watching it today. I look forward to your questions because I'm afraid I left too many things ambiguous. Perhaps I spoke a bit too fast, perhaps recording isn't easy and I'm still practicing. I still need to improve a lot, so I'm looking forward to your feedback, what you have to say. Thank you very much for watching. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen.